I'm speaking with Constance Sayers, author of A Witch in Time, which was published February 11th of this year by Redhook, which falls under Hatchet Book Group. Thank you for speaking with me.
Oh, thank you, Chris, for having me tonight.
Sure thing. First, I'm sure you have many writing ideas that swirl around. How did this particular idea rise above and dominate the rest?
Well, it comes on the heels of my first book that I had been working on for about 10 years was a rural noir book. So it was very, very different than this book. And I think I had just kind of been burned out from the close in gritty writing that's required for those books. And so I like to read Anne Rice, and I was a big Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan. So that's really what I'm attracted to as a reader and as a viewer. And so my sister had a painting that hung on her wall for many years, and it was a painting that she thought looked like a lot like me. And I remember at one point just looking at it and thinking, like, wouldn't it be cool if like it was? And so from there, I thought, well, I'll just try a narrative where a woman, there is a painting, and the painting actually is her, and it's from 100+ years ago. Mm-hmm. And just from there, honestly, it just kind of came out into into this narrative that I had taken to my workshop group, and some things didn't work and some things did work with it. And so I kind of just like fleshed it out a little bit more. But the one thing that really kind of stuck out that I was itching to do a little bit was a bit of a period piece. And so it really worked. The modern day, with the fact that this painting could have been her 100 years ago, kind of led me back to Belle Époque Paris, which is something I really wanted to write about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the detail is very rich, and being a resident of the DC metropolitan area, I was pleasantly surprised to see you use some of that setting. And then
I also am a resident of the DC metro area, and I feel that it is such a maligned setting. I mean, it's just used for, so rarely do movies or books go beyond, the intrigue of the Capitol or the nefariousness of the White House, or, and I just candidly was bored with that, because, I mean, those of us who live here know it's really an amazing city. And I wanted to kind of use some of the things that were a little off the beaten path. Like, I think Echo Park is very mysterious, and it's got this whole, nostalgic kind of pull to it. And I love the Kennedy Center. So I wanted to kind of use some of the things that I think, people don't necessarily know about.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned already some of what the book is about. Can you elaborate as much as you'd like about the protagonist and setting and conflict?
So Helen Lambert is in modern day Washington, and she goes out on a blind date with a man by the name of Luke Varner, and he's very mysterious, and she's just been going through a divorce, and so she's like kind of getting back out there, and he tells her that they've known each other for 100 years, and she thinks the date's a disaster. And so I think it does pull you in really quickly, because it's like just a horrible date. And here what she begins to learn is that she is the fourth version of a young woman from Belle Époque, France, known as Juliette Lecomte. And so she keeps returning again and again, every 34 to 40 years, in some kind of binding curse that has bound her to another man. And they keep reliving this doomed love affair again and again. And so it does have some witchcraft. It's a curse is the genesis of what happens, but it's also this woman in these different times, and she's got this kind of supernatural strange thing that's happened to her. But at the same time, she's got a bit of a love triangle in every one of these lives, and she's both learning from them as she's kind of going through them, but then she's also, kind of trying to stop this from happening again, because, I mean, now once she realizes kind of what's going on, she's kind of against the clock to try and see if she can actually put an end to it. And so that's really what the book is about.
Mm-hmm. So what research did you do for the book, as far as the setting and all that?
Yeah, so I always start with just books on the period, and I usually get like 4 or 5 really good books on like there was a lot of great books on the Belle Epoque, like France, and really a look at kind of the occult in Paris at the time, which was very very vibrant and robust, because you kind of had this push-pull against some of the occult and science, and so it was a really very interesting time in France. And so I read a lot of books on kind of political and social happenings in France at that time, and then I read Zola and a few books that were kind of written during the time to get the language and some of the customs. Then I've been to France several times doing research on the ground. I really believe the only place I couldn't go was Chalon, France. But I spent a lot of time in the Loire Valley this summer, and Paris, a lot of time in Paris. And I had a Louvre guide take me around. And an interesting thing about Louvre guides is they have to study for 7 years there to be able to actually do that. It's a really involved, long process to become a guide like that. And this guide took me all around Montmartre and all around Paris, basically showing me what would have been the case in 1895, 1896. For example, a woman could not have walked alone without a chaperone in 1895 and 1896 Paris if she were a quote-unquote lady. And so like little things like that I really didn't, that I just didn't know, and so she was just very helpful. I did the same thing then again in Los Angeles, and in fact I had the driver of Glitterati Tours tell me that he was just thrilled that I was asking him to go to Jean Harlow's and Carol Lombard's house. We're going to Calabasas to visit the Kardashians' house. And he said, I never get like requests like this. You really made me kind of get into my history books. And I think that people like that really love like that old Hollywood mystery and nostalgia. And so, I did a lot of the same thing then all over again with Los Angeles in the 1930s, and also listened to a lot of William Powell, Carol Lombard, William Powell, Myrna Loy type of movies, just because I wanted to kind of get that dialogue, that snappy dialogue. And I don't know that people really talked like that necessarily then, but I wanted it to have a distinctly different feel from what I thought was a little more of the lush language that you had in Belle Epoque France. And then the 70s, I mean, I kind of grew up in the 70s, and so I love them, and I wanted to really explore the idea of what it was like to cut an album in 1970. And so it really kind of gave me a great opportunity to kind of explore things that I was really interested in, and dive down really hard on the research. For the 1970s, I did a lot of research on the making of both the Fleetwood Mac White Album and the Fleetwood Mac and Rumors. And so just to kind of figure out, like, what happens to the dynamic when people go into a recording studio. And that was fascinating.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it does sound, it sounds really great. Since you mentioned the Belle Epoque period, that's kind of a steampunk period too. Your book doesn't go into any kind of steampunk at all, does it?
It doesn't, and I really, I right now I'm obsessed with, like, I love steampunk, and I also am just thinking that there is some kind of like really kind of punky Western, I really want to write a Western that it's like supernatural. And so I did not venture into that territory, but I love both of them.
Mm-hmm. And the Los Angeles part, is it more about, does it get noirish at all, or?
Definitely. So the 1933, 1934 period in Hollywood was very interesting because, I have a fixer, who's involved in the plot. And I was really interested in, this is very, like 1934, 1935-ish, were very tragic times. You had the death of Jean Harlow. Earlier than that, you had the death of Thelma Todd, and so there was a real noirish kind of feeling about Thelma Todd's death. I mean, how was she killed? And then Carol Lombard would die a few years later. So there was definitely kind of this very haunted Hollywood feel. It wasn't as hard boiled as something like a Raymond Chandler book, but I really wanted to kind of lay the track for the fact that, that this was really when the idea of Hollywood was forming. And so you had like some of the early studios doing some things that were, kind of a suspect, and I have a fixer. And so those are kinds of, if you are interested in those types of things, that's something that is definitely there.
Cool. Let me turn to sort of the process of writing, your process. So you mentioned some of your inspirations already. Are there other things you could mention as far as books, movies, or TV that inspired you or still inspire you?
Absolutely. I will say probably one of the biggest inspirations that I have had for this book is Andrew Davidson's The Gargoyle. It was out maybe 2008, and it just is a book that has haunted me. And it's probably one of my, I would say top 5 favorite books. Obviously, like I love Elizabeth Costa as the historian. It's got that kind of romance to it. Was very influenced by David Mitchell's Cloud Atlas. I like what he did in Cloud Atlas for the different time periods, and they felt very authentic and very different from each other. And I wanted that. The challenge in this book was having time periods that felt very encapsulated, but yet also had a larger like narrative tie. So that was something I really loved that he did and wanted to do as well. I'm a big fan of the Deborah Harkness, both Discovery Witches and all the books as well. And it is definitely an Outlander. If you like Outlander, there's a real, kind of Outlander feel for this book as well. So, and in terms of just television, I loved Dark Shadows growing up. Like I said, a big Buffy fan. I'm a big, sci-fi fan. Winona Earp is probably one of my favorite things right now, and Sabrina. And I love anything that's kind of supernatural. I'm really, really, really drawn to.
I'm speaking with Constance Sayers, author of A Witch in Time. You can find her on Instagram and Twitter at Constance Sayers. If you like this podcast, please like and follow me at chrisalvarez.com, on Instagram at Chris Alvarez Sci-Fi, on Facebook under Chris Alvarez FCN, on Twitter at Chris Alvarez FCN, and on YouTube under Chris Alvarez. Now back to the podcast. And how about music? Can you say there's any sort of soundtrack that goes with the book, or anything that kind of spurred you on?
Yeah. Well, there's definitely a soundtrack to the book. The work of Eric Satie on the classical side is, I was a DJ for 4 years at a midnight to 6 shift on a radio station outside of Pittsburgh. And so, I'm very drawn to the more of the classic rock music. That's just kind of what I had ended up playing a lot of. And then also new wave and punk. And I was kind of a kid growing up in the 1980s. And so that was something that I was also drawn to. But I will say that in going back and listening to the work of Eric Satie, if you're a music fan, it's really haunting music. And he just wrote some just beautiful pieces, and that kind of frames the Belle Epoque period. And then the music of the 1970s, you've got the Laurel Canyon sound, definitely. So you've got, I have them, the band, which is actually called No Exit, which is based off of the Jean-Paul Sartre book. The band is called No Exit, and they're on Sunset Strip in 1970. So you've got Buffalo Springfield, and you've got, the Troubadour. And so all of that is happening on Sunset Strip. So that is pretty forward in that narrative, in that 1970s time frame. And that's also a really interesting time frame too, 1970, because you had Easy Rider. And Easy Rider, if you remember, Dennis Hopper went through Taos, and so they actually record the record in 1970 in Taos because he fell in love with Taos and actually bought the Mabel Lujan Dodge house there. And so it's just a really great, like, each time period I think has a very interesting kind of encapsulation. And so hopefully I hope people like that, because it's full of a lot of heavily researched things that will kind of draw you into the time period.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So as far as writing, like your actual writing process, is there anything out of the ordinary that you say that you do to complete your work?
Well, when I am in writing mode, I write 1,000 words a day, and I'm very serious about that. That does not mean I don't want it to sound like I write 1,000 words a day every day for 365 days. I do not do that. But when I know that I've got 3 months of writing coming up to get to 90,000 words, I'm cranking out 1,000 words a day. And I will say that National Novel Writing Month, if for those of you who are writers, if you haven't done it, I really recommend it, because what it teaches you to do is stop editing and just keep writing, and keep writing through what is just crap, and keep writing, because I think there's something very important about finishing the work. We tend to, as writers, I think, go back and just obsess over the first 50 pages, and sometimes just don't move on from that. And it's really hard to assess, I think, your first 50 pages until you kind of know what you have. And so just that process of just pushing through. And then at the end of it, I remember the first time I did this, I had 90,000 words and I didn't know what to do with them. It was like 300 plus pages and it was a disaster. And then I started just kind of, putting 3 acts, like, okay, the first third has to, get you to the point where there's, like you everything that you kind of are introduced to everybody. And it's got to have that hook, and then the middle has to hold together, and then the ending has to be poignant. And so I've really followed that. But I just think the biggest thing is, for me, is you just have to really keep pushing. And I will say that if I have a great day of writing, and maybe I have 3,000 words that I'm doing, sometimes on a weekend I'll do that on like a Saturday if I just get on a roll, I will stop before I do the 3,000 and I'll hold the other 1,000 for the next day, just because like I want to be excited to come to return to the page. And so I really have to trick myself into getting a first draft. I fight with myself, I trick myself, I do whatever I have to do to get that thing done.
Over time, since you first started writing to now, how has your approach changed over time?
I think that, I think that before getting a book contract, I had a little bit more like time in the world to obsess over things and workshop things. I living in DC, one of the places that's been a very valuable resource for me has been the Writers Center in Bethesda. And, I would leave work and I would go there and I would take various workshops and I would work again on my first 50 pages, or I'd work on short stories that I might take pieces of and bring them into a book. But I will say that you have to get being published was a difference for me, because you have to have a right-left brain. They both have to work in conjunction. You've got to be as good on the business side as you are on the creative side, and you've got to call on them both, like whenever you need them. So it's like, if I need to, I might be, doing publicity and stuff for the book while I'm writing. I mean, I'm in the current, working on my second book, which is due next in 2021. So I'll have to pivot quickly and write for that. And, hey, the muse may not be there. But I've got to sit down and find the muse. And that was just something I think I was a little, I had a little bit more time, but I'm not sure that I actually used it any wiser. It's just, you've got to, you've got people counting on you. And so you've got to turn in the work. And so that, it's just different. And so you've got to have an equal part creative side as you do business side. And I think that is something that I just don't think I was expecting. It's great. It's kind of, but it's also, it was a surprise.
So, have you done, what sort of non-writing work have you done that's influenced how you approach writing or what you write?
Well, my day job, I'm a media executive. And so that, I've been doing the same job for about 20 years. And I love media because it's still like the written word. So I love that, but I'm completely on a different side of the house. I'm on the business side. So my days are spent with spreadsheets. But I will say that the one thing that work taught me was the importance of collaboration. and that nothing you do or nothing you write is precious. So like, I'll work with my team to get something together, to get strategic plans and things together. And it's a real team effort. And by the time we're done, it's something that we've shaped that's really good and much better, because everybody's kind of looking at it with a critical eye. And so that, I think, really translated well into the publishing industry, because like it's such a collaborative process. You and your editor and and the marketing teams and stuff. You're definitely getting their input, and they're really pros and they know what they're doing. And so it's been really great. And I think work prepared me for that.
Mm-hmm. Were there parts of this book, this novel, that you wanted to keep in, but just for whatever reason had to go? You don't have to say what it is. I'm just curious if there were parts that.
No, happy to talk about that, because I do think it is important. My editor, Sarah Guan, at Redhook, she wasn't as thrilled with the 1970s chapters, and so I listened to what she said, and then I went back and completely rewrote them. Mm-hmm. And so what you have is a version 2 of that. And I feel like those are my favorite parts of the book. Mm-hmm. And I think just candidly, that is my favorite time period of, like, when you look at all of them, if you say to me which one was your favorite, it is definitely 1970s. But I had to work for that harder, because it wasn't there necessarily the first time. And I thought her feedback was very valuable, and went back, and she wasn't wrong. Mm-hmm. So I think it ended up making the book much better.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Bit of a whimsical question. Thinking back when you were young, was there any power or technology or maybe fictional setting that you yearned for, that you wanted or you wanted to be in?
Oh my gosh, I'm such a child of the 70s. I mean, I remember like trying to figure out, did I want to have Bewitched's power, or did I want to be the Bionic Woman? And I mean, I weirdly said the Bionic Woman, and now I'm like, what were you thinking? I mean, you could just be bewitched and just make yourself bionic. You know what I mean? So like, I don't know. Like I mean, I'm such a, I mean, I loved growing up, anything magical like that. I was really into. And so, I don't know if that answers your question, but like, yeah. I loved, but I wasn't an I Dream of Jeannie fan, but I was a very, very big Bewitched fan.
So you wanted to be a witch with all kinds of good powers.
You know it. Even back then I did, yes.
That's funny. So you mentioned some of the difficulties in finishing the book. Did you have any others as far as meeting deadlines or getting stuff done? And you mentioned the travel you did. Was there any problems with getting to locations in time or that sort of thing?
No. I'm a little bit of a freak about that kind of stuff. So I'm always like, I always hit my deadlines. I'm really good about that. No, I mean, I can't say I'm an over meticulous planner, and I knew though I needed to, I wanted to get this book to the publishing house, like to get it out to editors. And so I knew I was racing against the clock. And so I knew when my agent wanted it finished and stuff. So when we were sending it out, and so I definitely was like, especially toward the end, I did an emergency Taos visit. I had been to Santa Fe several times, but not Taos, and I felt like I needed to go. And so I did an emergency Taos visit in the middle of winter. And don't know that I advise it, but I mean, it's beautiful. But I didn't really need to ski there at that point. But I wasn't skiing, so I was just like there in the middle of this magical winter. It was beautiful, but like it was fraught with potential for being snowbound and all kinds of other things. And but that was definitely one of the last things I did. I held placeholders there because I knew that that was really the last bit of research I needed to do.
Did you take any photographs that you referenced, that you used as a reference as you wrote? Maybe, describe the setting you photographed?
Yeah, and I've actually started incorporating a lot of those. If you follow me on Instagram, I'm on it's at Constance Sayers. Mm-hmm. I do what they call behind the scenes. I just have posted 2 of them, which I've done I did a behind the scenes of the opera dresses and the opera. And then I also did one behind the scenes of some of the Los Angeles outtakes that I've had from photos. And so I'm trying to incorporate the research. And Instagram's just a great way to do that because you can kind of like scroll through some of the pictures and tell a little bit more of a story. Mm-hmm. And so I have definitely been doing that whenever I'm trying to do that for each of the time periods. And I think it's, I like it, and hopefully other people like it too.
Also, do you have that classic story of having, the book rejected a bunch of times before it was finally accepted, or did you have an easier time of it?
No, so I have, it took me 10 years to write my first book, like I said, mm-hmm. and it was a rural noir, and it was about, it was just a small town mystery. And that book did not, so I got an agent with that book, and I got an agent through Writer's Digest, and I took one of those courses that they have that you can take where they an agent will work with you on your first 10 pages. And I met my agent from Sandra Dykstra, Roz Foster, mm-hmm. and she and I just kept in touch over this book, and she kept giving me, reading it and getting a little, 50 pages, then the whole manuscript, and giving me feedback on it. And we worked together on that for about 3 months. And then she offered me representation. And, I kind of thought, well, great, then I'm going to get a book contract. This is great. This is what happens. And while this is going to be, it took a couple years, it took 10 years and a lot of, I wrote short stories, had a lot of rejection. But I thought, okay, this will happen. And it didn't. And so we put that book out for publishers, and she did not have offers, and she stopped from, going forward with it, and told me that we weren't going to go forward with it anymore. And I have to say, I was devastated. Yeah. I mean, it was really, 10 years in the making of this book, and I was just completely devastated. Mm-hmm. And so that happened in the fall of, I'm going to say 2016. And I didn't write again until 2017. I mean, I took like 6 months to just really with my wounds, and I had given her 50 pages of A Witch in Time, and she was kind of shopping it at the same time, saying when she has another idea, and here it is, and she said, look, that's a really good book, you should really be working on that. And she called me in April and said, how's that book coming along? Well, I had coming along, it was I hadn't done anything with it because I was devastated, see earlier discussion, lots of crying, lots of devastation. And so I was, and she said, well, when can I see it? And I said, September. So then that began a marathon writing session. And, and it just all, I was really under the gun for it. And when I gave it to her, I was hearing from people from some of my first readers, they were like, well, it's I can't put it down. It's really great. And I had not heard that from my first book. So I was like, ooh, maybe I'm onto something here. And my agent thought it was really good. And so, but we took another year to get it in shape. And then we took it out in fall of 2018. And that's when Redhook, and I had seen Louisa Morgan's book, Secret History of Witches, and I had sent my agent a note, and I said, look, I think this is exactly where it needs to be. This is the publishing house for my book, and that's exactly where we ended up. And so, it was kind of a little bit of serendipity there. And so, but no, it felt like it was a long slog for publishing.
But still, the ending, it's a good ending. It's a happy ending.
It was a really good ending. Yeah, it was I just remember I almost fainted when I heard it, had been picked up.
Or new beginning, I should say, not an ending.
New beginning, yes.
So I think you touched on your next writing project. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I am currently working on a book about a circus with dark origins, and it takes place in 1925 in Paris. So it's kind of that lost generation. You've got a lot of Modigliani has just died, and you've got Ernest Hemingway and Man Ray and everybody over in Montparnasse. And so this circus is kind of circling around that crowd as well. And so it's a very interesting kind of potentially demonic circus.
Sounds cool. A lot of travel for that one, or research, I guess?
No, I just I had spent several weeks in France this year, and just kind of did everything that I had kind of wanted to get, kind of all the research I had wanted to do. I haven't found the time to go back, and so it's just gonna. I feel pretty good about the research that I did, and I've been to Montparnasse a bunch of times, so I mean I feel pretty good about that. But no, I didn't get a chance to go back a second time this year.
Oh well. So you mentioned. So I was going to ask where people can find you online. You mentioned Twitter at Constance Sayers.
Yeah, both Instagram and Twitter are at Constance Sayers. Yeah, and if you want to see some of the behind the scenes, some of the costumes and things like that, that's on Instagram. And and any kind of news on this book and the next book are kind of putting those on Twitter. And
I'll spell that for people. CONSTANCESAYERS. That's all the questions I have. Do you have any final thoughts or words?
No, thank you. Just thank you for having me on the podcast. I'm it's just, if you're writing, just don't give up. I think that's the biggest thing, because just dig in and you'll get published. Yeah, definitely dig in, persevere. Thank you for listening. You can find more interesting information like this on chrisalvarez.com or fullcontactnerd.com. You can also find the podcast on your favorite podcast feed under the title Full Contact Nerd. That includes Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify. Please remember to rate this podcast. It really helps. We're on Instagram at Chris Alvarez Sci-Fi, on YouTube under Chris Alvarez, on Facebook under Chris Alvarez Full Contact Nerd, and on Twitter at Chris Alvarez Full Contact Nerd. Don't forget to sign up for my weekly newsletter where I recommend newly published books. The subscription box is on my webpage. Thanks for listening, and keep imagining the past, the present, and the future.